Hello everyone. I've been an avid reader of No Sleep. This is my first post and I'm not sure if the time is the right place for it, but I wanted to share my horrifying experience from high school. High school was 4 of the greatest years in my life. Things were so much simpler back then than they currently are. Now I am 25 years old, with 6 years of service in the Navy, and looking back, those times seem so long ago. I always reminisce on all the good times I had with my friends. We were a close group, always getting together after school or going out on the weekends. My head swells with so many fond memories I have had with them, so many great memories. Except one memory that, when I think back to it, still sends a chill down my spine. It was our senior year, 2008, and graduation was just around the corner. We were all excited to be moving ahead with our lives. I was joining the military, and the rest were going to different colleges. I will admit, it was a bittersweet moment. Yes, we were excited for the future, but a bit sad knowing our group would not be whole like it was throughout high school. My friends decided they were going to give me an awesome going-away celebration. The plan was to pitch in some money and have my older brother rent us a cabin in the mountain for the weekend. We packed our bags and drove up the mountain to the cabin. There was a small town nearby, and our cabin was about half a mile down the road. There were a few other cabins nearby, but ours was at the edge of town, surrounded by woods. We unpack our things and head inside. We were not disappointed. The living dining room was enormous, with a big L-shaped couch and a long table with plenty of chairs. We had a good-sized television and even a pool table. There were 3 separate bedrooms down the hall with 2 beds each. There were 7 of us, so I volunteered to sleep on the couch. I didn't really care, it was comfy as hell anyways. The only problem I had was that the couch was next to this sliding glass door that for some reason had no blinds or drapes. I was not about to admit to everyone that it bothered me. As soon as we were unpacked, we decided to get the good times started. My brother and a couple others went into town to buy alcohol and food, while the rest of us prepared for the night's festivities. We ate, we drank, played some drinking games like beer pong, which I was never good at, and had a good time. Later that evening, we were all gathered in the living room, talking about funny moments we had had in high school. We were all feeling pretty good from all the alcohol consumption. As I was telling one of my stories, we heard a female friend of mine shriek, "Oh my God!" It startled the shit out of us, and we quickly turned our heads to her, standing in front of the sliding glass door. She quickly turns around with the biggest smile and says, "You guys, it's snowing!" We all run to the window like children, and sure enough, there is a good amount of snow falling from the sky. We go outside, and as the snow builds up, we have a good snowball fight and build ourselves a crappy snowman. After a while, we get tired and go inside. Running around in our lack of sobriety caused a couple of my friends to puke. It was late, and we all decided to turn in for the night. We had planned to buy a sled in town and find a snowy hill in the morning. We all went to our rooms and fell asleep. I was awoken in the middle of the night to what I thought was a stick or branch cracking in the distance. I laid there for a few minutes, trying to see if I heard it again or if it was just my imagination. Nothing. I told myself I was hearing things. I got up to drink a bottle of water. I did not want to wake up the next morning with a nasty hangover. As I walked by the sliding glass door, I looked outside. Snow was still falling, just not as much, and the moon gave the snow an eerie blue glow. I went to the kitchen and grabbed a bottle of water from the fridge. As I drank, I got lost in my thoughts. I was going to miss times like these with my friends. Did I make the right decision, joining the military? I was contemplating my future when I was suddenly snapped back into reality by the sound of crunching. I listened, trying to figure out what exactly that sound was. It slowly got louder, then stopped. Then it slapped me in the face. Footsteps in the snow. I immediately turned my head to the sliding glass window. My heart skipped a beat. A shock of pins and needles ran down my skin. There at the sliding glass window was a dark silhouette of a man. His right hand was cupped around his eyes, and he was peering in, surveying the living room. I was frozen, confused, wondering who this was looking in. He must not have seen me, for he was still moving his head, looking around. It was only when he lifted his left hand and cupped it around the other side of his face that my confusion turned to horror. In his left hand, he held a hatchet. I just stood there and watched as he looked inside. He put his hands down and looked down to his right, towards the door handle, and began reaching for it. That's when I noticed it, and my heart stopped. In our drunken stupidity, we forgot to lock the door when we came back inside from playing in the snow. I panicked when his hand gripped the door handle. "So can I help you?" I said loudly, trying to sound intimidating but clearly sounding scared. It startled the man, for he quickly looked up in my direction. We stared at each other for what seemed like hours but were merely seconds. I could not see his face, but I could feel his eyes piercing my soul. He let go, slowly backed away, and started jogging away. He didn't break eye contact with me until he was a good 15 feet from the cabin. One of my friends who woke up to my shouting came to the living room and asked who I was talking to and why I was standing in the dark. I locked the door in a hurry, and he could tell there was something wrong. He looked out the glass door and caught a glimpse of the man a second before he disappeared into the woods. "What the hell is that?" I woke everyone up and told them what happened. We were all shitting bricks. Needless to say, we all decided to nope the fuck out of there the next morning, and none of us were going to sleep the rest of the night. As we left the next morning, hundreds of thoughts ran through my head. What if I didn't sleep in the living room? If there was nobody there with the door left unlocked, what could have happened? What were his intentions with that hatchet? We'll never know, and it's sad to say that my last memory, together with my friends, was a horrible one. Hey, nah sleep. I'm not entirely sure where to post this, and I guess this board is the one that best fits. I cannot stress to you enough the authenticity of this, and to us this as a warning for all backcountry hikers. I'm terribly shook about this whole ordeal, and I'm writing this pretty much the second I got back with. This past long weekend, it was BC Day on Monday. My friends and I decided to make the trek to my family's cabin out in the northern BC wilderness. Before I continue on with this, let me give you an idea of how remote this damn place is. For anyone that doesn't know where British Columbia is, it is the westernmost province of Canada. And my family's cabin is basically in the center of the province, north of Prince George and east of Fort St. James. In the 70s, there was a huge boom in the forestry sector that caused much of BC's wilderness to be systematically logged. This logging caused the creation of many Forest Service roads, or FSR for short. This allowed the general population access to previously inaccessible and truly wild areas of BC. One of these areas is known as the Muskeg Teardrop and is about 150 kilometers north of Prince George. Crazily enough, my grandparents decided to build a cabin in this remote area. This cabin is situated on a small lake, approximately 500 meters long by 200 meters wide. It has a name, but for privacy's sake, I will not be releasing it. This cabin is only accessible by driving 180 kilometers down a FSR, then onto what is basically a damn goat trail for another 10 kilometers. After that goat trail, there is about another 5 kilometers that can only be done on foot to the south side of the lake, which we then need to canoe across to get to the cabin. When I say remote, I really goddamn mean it. It takes roughly 4 hours from pavement to reach it. And there is absolutely no cell service. Our only means of communication is a short-band radio used for letting loggers know where you are on the roads. Now that you get a sense of how remote this cabin is, let me continue my story. My girlfriend, 2 closest friends, our dog and I decided to make the trek out to the cabin. We are all ages 20 to 25 with varying levels of outdoor skill and first aid. My one friend, let's call him M, is even a nurse. My girlfriend's and mine dog, Lily, is a little Dachshund that isn't really good for much, but we take her along because she likes to get out. My schooling has had me specialize in outdoor survival and leadership, so planning trips like this is a breeze. We had packed all the essentials into our bags and some extras. We had fishing rods, food, axes, extra clothes, and even a rifle for the old fuck of a grizzly that likes to hang around the cabin. By any standard, we were geared to the nines. My first lesson of outdoor survival was to respect the shit out of Mother Nature and realize there are lots we do not know about her. Never had that saying had more credence than this trip. The drive-in was going rather smoothly, and everyone was in high spirits. I had borrowed my brother's big jacked-up bush truck, so the drive was easier than I remembered it. We were so confident, overconfident, that we even cracked a few ghost stories and creepy tales about the deep woods. One of my friends, let's call him T, told us the old Aboriginal tale of a creature that stands 8 feet tall, with a deer's head that can mimic any noise and lures unsuspecting yuppies into the woods. After that story, we had to stop as we were all creeping each other out. As we pulled up to where the road ends and where the trail starts, I couldn't help but feel this sense of grave urgency. You know when you have to go down into the basement and you know you should make your time down there limited? You don't know why you have to rush, but you book ass out of that basement as fast as you can as soon as you can. I was feeling that feeling, but worse. Like I knew if we didn't start moving, something terrible was going to happen to us. I obviously thought that I was just being a yuppie and didn't bother to tell anyone else. When I looked around at my friends, everyone was in jovial spirits and happy to be stretching their feet. Pushing my uneasy feeling into the back of my mind, I grabbed my pack and we departed the truck. After hiking a couple of kilometers, a noise stopped my group dead in our tracks. If you've never heard an animal die, this noise would be hard to liken to anything else. Just around the bend, we heard what sounded like an animal being physically torn to shreds by something. You could literally hear chunks of viscera hitting the ground as the animal gave its final cries. Being the realist that I am, my first thought was a bear or wolves. Both of those are uncommon in the area, but not unheard of. With that notion, I loaded the gun, dropped my bag, and instructed my friends to stay close as we rounded the bend. Just as we were about to take the last couple of steps to clear the corner, we could hear something large crash off into the woods just ahead. As we took our final steps towards the animal kill, I could not believe my eyes. I had been hunting a few times and stumbled across a couple of animal kills as well. This not anything remotely similar. Whatever killed this animal, it was probably an elk, had absolutely devastated it. There was blood upwards of 8 feet away in all directions, and some even up a tree. The head and spine were roughly 20 feet away, and they looked like they were dragged and dropped there by whatever fled the scene shortly before. What disturbed me the most was the fact that there was nothing eaten off of the corpse. It was just wantonly ravaged and then left. Whether or not we scared the bear or whatever off before it could eat, I'm not sure, but I'd never seen an animal royally demolish something like that before. There was a sense of pure primal rage from this scene, and it shook me and probably my friends to the core. The kicker? It wasn't in my friend's voice, nor did it sound remotely correct. All of the pacing that a normal human follows when talking wasn't there. It was like someone that barely knew English was reading something off of a piece of paper. The thing repeated that phrase several times over and then stopped. The entire time, my girlfriend was just whispering "what the fuck" over and over. After about 30 seconds of silence, we heard twigs snapping. And I shit you not, whole trees shifting as something crashed through the woods towards the cabin. Whatever this thing was, it was alarmingly fast. It traversed the whole section of Eastern Lake in about 10 seconds, despite it being heavily forested. Lily was going absolutely nuts and was trying to chew through the tree we had tied her to, and then just like that, she was gone. That thing burst through the tree line, sprinted up to the tree, pulled it out of the ground, picked it and Lily, and galloped back off into the bushes. I was completely in a state of shock. My friends and I just stared, and where Lily was, in a state of disbelief. M was the first to break the silence. He just kind of whimpered and started crying. T, being the only cool-headed one, just rode back to shore as quick as he could. As soon as we got to shore, we sprinted into the cabin, barred the door, and loaded the gun. After we calmed down as much as we could, we tried to piece together what we saw. We agreed that whatever that thing was, it was minimum 7 feet tall and ran on 4 legs. It ran like a human would, rear end up in the air and almost crawling in the front, but absurdly fast. It had hooves for feet, but human-like hands, but with extra long fingers and thumbs. The worst part? It looked like it had a bear skull for a head. Not a full head, just the skull. After a solid 2 hours, we made the hard decision to not go looking for Lily. We knew deep down that there was no way she was still alive, and we weren't going to risk losing another one of us. It was already getting dark, so we decided to get some rest and leave early next morning. I want to leave you guys with some sort of closure for this story, but we didn't get any. The next morning, we hiked back to the truck, and to our surprise, Lily was in the box of the truck, seemingly unharmed. She was asleep in the box in what looked like a bed of grass. Whatever that thing was, it spared Lily. It spared Lily. As soon as we got into cell range, we contacted my grandparents. They acted like this was some sort of normal occurrence and laughed it off. I shit you not. Oh, a large animal took your dog away, then put it back 5 kilometers away? Silly cabin antics. The laughter was somewhat forced, and I could tell that they were scared. They also said they would go up next week and check it out for themselves. They also stressed that we could not tell the conservation officers or the rangers. Since I'm training to be a CO, this struck me very oddly, but I brushed it off because I wanted to get home. I used to go out to the cabin once a year, but I think that tradition is done. I have many more stories, albeit none as terrifying as this one, to share, if you guys will listen, and I'm sure I could get some out of my grandparents too. To anyone that wants to spend time out in the backcountry, please remember this when you head out. The backcountry is still full of unknown things, and some of them don't want to be known. Now, this story did not happen to me, but one of my friends who I worked with last summer at the camp that this took place at, and I think it would fit here pretty well. Sometime around 2000 or earlier, my friend had gone camping with his family. He's about 5 at this time. They had gone to this summer camp that his family had been involved with for years, and were allowed to use one of their cabins for the weekend because they were on good terms with the full-time staff. Now, the camp is divided into a few clusters of cabins, all of which were pretty old and creepy and built in the early 1930s. They'd been well maintained, but never refurbished, and with just mesh windows and creaky big wooden doors, they could give anyone the creeps, especially with the winter wind blowing. My friend's family was staying in one of the cabins close to the building where the camp director worked and slept. On the second day, as it was getting dark, my friend and his older brother, who was a regular counselor there for the past few years, went for a walk, which led them down a winding dirt road to another cluster of cabins. They could both tell there was something wrong, but they couldn't place it. My friend several years later told me that it felt like everything looked completely ordinary, but it was like there was just something that completely threw the vibe off. His brother would attribute it to what he noticed next. The furthest cabin from the entrance had all of the windows closed. There were large wooden panels that had to be lifted up and put in the mesh windows. Then he heard a loud thud. And then the lights in the cabin were on. Now, it wasn't uncommon for other cabins to be rented out by hunters in the winter, so he left it alone, even though he still had a strange vibe and decided not to investigate further. The next morning, during breakfast, he was speaking to the camp director and casually asked him how many other cabins he was planning on renting that hunting season, and mentioned that he had noticed that another cabin was being used back towards the far side of camp. The director had a stunned look on his face and then told him to call the police and that they weren't renting out any of the other cabins that weekend. The police showed up, and after a 2-hour standoff in the middle of the woods ended with a man in custody. For the past 3 weeks, there had been a dangerous man hiding out in a summer camp. My friend didn't know it at the time, but was later told by his brother that when they took him out he was starving and unshaved. He had a rifle, a pistol, and a shotgun, and 2 duffel bags full of valuables that had been taken during violent break-ins over the past month in the surrounding counties. Desperate violent robber hiding out in a cabin in the woods. Let's never meet.